All right, guys, what's up? We're back here on the Conquer Athlete YouTube channel. Coach Tommy Pomatico and myself, Jason Lyden. And today we're going to talk about a topic that got presented to us. And it is, at what point in the year do you stop focusing on overall strength gains and start focusing on building strength, power, endurance, and your ability to move a high percentage of your max for reps? So, with this being said, being the main question point, who do we want to have start off with this, Tommy? Me or you?
You go.
All right, I'm gonna go first on this one. I'm probably gonna be a little jumbled up in my explanation, but I'll come back around to it. Because hearing that question, my brain is start going into a couple different scenarios from thinking about different athletes. And I think the first thing we have to keep in mind when I think about this question is we know data points around what's needed from a strength component to be successful in the sport if it comes out. Now, I know right now that's sort of, in my opinion, fluid with the way this year went, because if your goal is not to get to semis, arguably there's not that much emphasis on pure overall strength maxes throughout the first and second stage of the Open. But if your goal is to get to semis, then you are going to need that. My point is, we know at some point there's a range within lifts that athletes have to be at. So we have to do our due diligence to get them as close to their potential of that as we possibly can without a negative response or negative effect to other components within inside the sport of CrossFit. So for that type of athlete, I'm thinking, well, we have to build their strength. We have to give them the ability to get stronger. And I think at some point, a good coach can look at an athlete, right? And they can be like, we're pretty close to what their potential is on this lift before we have to start really pulling back from other stuff. You know what I'm saying, Tommy? And I think about that a lot with athletes. It's like, is this sort of like their tipping point before we have to now start really stripping back other stimuluses and other stressors that they need in the sport? So for those athletes, when we get to that point or close to that point, that's when I'm sort of making the shift to focus on, okay, well, now let's just really focus on building their ability to move the barbell, improve strength, power, endurance, get the ability to improve that percentage of their max and do that really well. Then if the opportunity presents itself, I may cycle back to the start and work on offshoots that can create more strength, whether that means I need to operate with more hypertrophy work to make that muscle cross-section bigger, to create potentiation for strength or power, or if I need to kind of reroute and focus on different parameters since we spent a length of time improving skill sets and capacity and whatnot. So that's like one athlete that I kind of look at. And the athlete that came to my mind with that one, right, Tommy, was Kalina Ladares. Kalina Ladares was a games athlete. She was someone that didn't have huge overall strength numbers, but for her, it's like her snatch, her clean jerk, her squat, her dead, they were kind of at where they're going to be at considering the amount of work that she wanted to do and work we had to put in with gymnastics work and her running and all that stuff that she loved to do. So for her, there was like this switch where there's a lot of focus on just the endurance component of moving a barbell, of which she was really, really good at and could excel at that point with inside of competition. But we knew if a 1 rep max came up, there was going to be a lot of damage control that we had to do. Now, there are some other athletes but someone like a Kalina, who's a more endurance-based athlete, that person is going to adapt a lot quicker to building capacity and endurance with the barbell than somebody else just because they're the endurance base. So now it's creating efficiency and dynamic energy control around moving a higher percentage of their max for reps. Now, someone who's more like endurance, power and strength-based athlete, that person, I know that no matter what we do, they're going to naturally always lift better, move a heavy weight, lift a strong weight. So that athlete, I'm going to actually spend less time and less cycles trying to develop their overall strength because I know that's going to come naturally and faster for them. And we could probably going to see some good overall natural strength power max improvements by working on strength, power, endurance. Almost like if you think about it from an energy system perspective, right? If you build someone's threshold and they have a decent VO2 max, when I say threshold, I mean aerobic threshold, you can spend a lot more time with inside an anaerobic threshold training component and see benefits for on VO2 max and benefits on aerobic capacity. If you spend too much time in aerobic capacity, you're not going to see benefits on VO2 max, and you'll probably see minimal benefits on threshold. If you spend too much time on VO2 max, you're not going to see benefits on aerobic capacity. You can see some small potentiation for anaerobic threshold. So a strength and power athlete, I look at that similar format within this side of that, meaning if they're naturally strong and naturally powerful, they naturally have a bigger musculature, a bigger musculature structure to them, broad shoulders, specific limb length. That athlete is going to be able to move weight well. And chances are that if you spend more time developing, because you will, their overall capacity for power and strength, endurance, and their ability to move a high percentage of their max for reps, that's going to have a very similar transfer to the other areas, just like energy system work, meaning you're probably still going to see some good benefits at their top end ability or the ability to maintain their top end numbers really fucking well. As well as it's going to have good transfer to being able to move a high percentage of the max reps and lower percentage of their max for longer duration workouts, like 20, 30-minute workouts. So from a programming coach perspective, do I have a definitive answer like, hey, like, you got to spend 6 to 12 weeks on that. And then at that point, once you develop strength, then you're going to cycle through between weeks of building power, endurance, base? Not necessarily. I think we try to strip down the data. We could probably look at that a little bit more efficiently. But kind of like shooting from my hip on this one to start with this question, I look at it more as a type of athlete, what I think their potentiation is for top end strength and how close we are to that. And then from there, that transferring over to the capacity endurance work with the barbell. And then if it is someone that is more power strength based, you're going to see a huge carryover on either end of the spectrum with the barbell. So I don't know if that's like a clear cut answer around like when do you stop, just because for me, it's very hard for me to be like, okay, Tommy, you need to do 12 weeks at strength, and whatever we create with inside those 12 weeks, we need to spend 24 weeks, like a 1-to-2 ratio or 1-to-1 ratio of time within training blocks between overall strength and then overall strength, power, endurance. So that's sort of like where I sit off with that one offhand.
Well, so a couple questions. First one is the first one I guess would be what percentage of their 1 rep max would you start to utilize to kind of start up that strength endurance phase?
70 to 75%. If I'm doing something where it's going to be in like a 20 to 30 rep range. If I'm going outside that, then I go 60 to 70%, just for the sake of structural integrity and just, familiarity.
Beautiful.
And the goal is to get them right to that 90% over time.
Love that. That's cool. Okay. And now would you ever I don't know, in some of your formats, do you try building both at the same time for some specific athletes who are kind of in that middle ground where like they're just under the top end strength of most really good athletes, but also not as great as moving on a bar at some of the athletes that are weaker than them?
Yeah, so you mean like a concurrent program where you're still
Mm-hmm.
focusing on building strength, but also working on capacity and driven work for them as well?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I think offhand, like I look at two of your athletes that pop in my mind automatically, and that's Kalissa and Nikki.
Mm-hmm.
And they're two athletes that move really well with the barbell. They're two athletes that have amazing endurance and have a high skill set, right? The handstand push-ups, muscle ups. Yeah, like one or two of those things might be a little off from where you want them for being a games athlete, but they can do everything and their capacity is huge. So someone like that, athletes like that, to me, they possess that internal stress resilience to be able to work on levels of top end strength and strength, power, endurance, because the amount of stimulus that you need to apply for them to improve like mixed modal work and gymnastics work and fatigue limiters is less than a lot of other people because they're so good in that area. Where now with inside of a training session, if you're doing like a concurrent program, you can hit like, a snatch and a back squat and taper in between 80 to 90% for specific reps to drive a strength adaptation for them. And then you might, if it's a B or a C or the next level, you might work in like mid-level clean and jerks under fatigue to build power and strength endurance there. Because if you are going to cycle back and finish with some mixed modal work, it really doesn't need to be that intense with those athletes, right? Like 20-minute EMOMs, they're going to crush. Running, they're going to crush. Machine work, they're super powerful at. Gymnastics work, they're very good at, right? So athletes like that, to me, they can operate well inside of a program, a concurrent program that's focusing on top end strength and barbell strength, power, endurance, and capacity, because the other stuff that's going to be put in their program is not going to be that stressful, overbearing to them. I think for that, one thing you just have to be mindful of is when you are doing the top end strength work, just the overall volume at specific percentages that you're doing is what comes to my mind offhand.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you were going to do have that concurrent phase, would you think of it as more of a day where you're kind of keeping the focusing on strength, or would you then have strength endurance day, or would you do strength followed by strength endurance? Or do you think it doesn't matter? Like, obviously, you could do both, but like, which one do you think pays more merit?
Are you saying, do I focus
So
like,
maybe like Monday would be like heavy snatch, heavy back squat, pulls, and then whatever the rest of that session you wanted to look like. And then maybe on like Wednesday, you're more focused on the snatch, but for more like endurance work, like mid level. You didn't touch anything heavy that day. Like, have you done stuff like that? Or do you like to follow the heavy strength stuff with the endurance work?
I've done it both ways and I've had success with both ways where it's like, you look at the overall span of a program, you say within inside this week, we're going to have, let's say, 2 days where we're going to focus on top end strength for these athletes with the specific movements I need to bring up, right? And then with inside those days, we're going to put a little bit more emphasis to build their top end strength. So the subsequent work we're going to do on those days, let's call it Monday and Friday for plenty of rest time in between, that is going to be lower intense, maybe some more gymnastics based work, volume based work, or even lower intense subsequent dynamic contraction work. But it's not going to strip from the overall work that we're doing. It's allow for recovery. And then for that matter, we're going to go out 48 hours, like you said, and put it on a Wednesday, where now on Wednesday, there's going to be no top end strength work, but we're going to work on strength, power, endurance work under fatigue and things like that, right? So then Tuesday will be a low intensity, lower volume day, because that's going to be sandwiched by two more neurological, metabolic, fatiguing aspects. Thursday off, Friday strength, low skill set, Saturday. And then I could even subsequent with inside that same week of Friday being lower volume, top end strength work, paired with power strength endurance work, paired with lower intensity gymnastics work, or lower volume, mid-level intensity strength work, skill work, Saturday strength, power, endurance work, moderate to lower intensity, maybe more volume there, right? So I kind of look at it from an undulating format amongst the days. That's definitely one way to do it. Another way I might do with some athletes who might be a little bit heavier weighted on the strength power side would be pairing them together with inside a day. So let's just say the morning is very easy aerobic work, and then we come back, top end strength work, low volume, higher intensity, strength, power, endurance, moderate level intensity, moderate level volume, and then skill sets. Following day is going to be an easier day, skill set work. Wednesday, lower intensity, moderate level day. Come back Friday, top end strength work, lower intensity, lower volume, strength, power, endurance work, moderate, higher intensity, lower volume, skill work. Saturday, skill set base. So I've structured them both ways and had success for athletes with that around the question that was posed. The biggest thing is just kind of monitor intensity and volume in the subsequent days in between. And I don't think, like, I say this a lot. I don't think that it's being said, hey, you have to do this way, you have to do it that way, because people respond differently. People have different formats and segments throughout the week and day that allow for some days you can sustain more stress and more work, other days you can't, right? So when you take that into account, both ways can drive success.
Yeah, no, I like both ways too, because I think they give sole focuses for that day when you do them separately. But I also really like doing it on the same day. But like I think you said already, you just have to be careful with how much intensity you're giving them on the strength part before giving them volume on the strength endurance part. That's where things can get a little hairy, I think.
Yeah, because when we first started, like 10, 12 years ago, I put shit together. I'm like, holy fuck. Where it was like, snatch 70%, 2x5, 75, 80, 85%, clean pulls, front squat, 70, 75%, 3 reps on a minute, 8 minutes. I'm looking at it, I'm like, holy shit, like, how does people not fucking die? But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. No, that's awesome. And so, what do you think the ultimate goal should be? Someone who's training more of that strength endurance route, like, well, actually, maybe another good question could be, you know, if you start by working strength endurance and isolation to really just focus on it, but then of course we know we probably want to be able to bring it into a mixed setting. When is it a good indicator for you to be like, okay, I think we can start mixing this with various dynamic contractions and higher intensities.
Yeah, I always like to have a set format being from an isolated standpoint. Let's just call it clean and jerks. I want to get them up to, X percentage to be able to complete X amount of reps under specific parameters, right? And then once they can hit and achieve that, then I strip down the intensity and add in varying fatigue limiters and build it back up from there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Do
when
you?
people go ahead.
No, you go.
And the fatigue limiters can be anything from like we talk about a lot contrasting complementary fatigue from various dynamic contractions and the same dynamic contractions, right? Like deadlifts, cleans, hang power cleans, shoulder overhead, like all different variations is what they have to be ready for.
Yeah, 100%. That's probably the toughest part.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, one other thought that came to mind really quickly was just like when I think I obviously understand what you're saying, but when you say strip it to back down, you mean bringing the load back down. So back to 70, 75%, and then building it back up.
Yeah, like I might even go as low as like 50, 55% if we're hitting like, clean and jerks and muscle ups, right? Or something like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, like a 185 clean and jerk type thing.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yep. No, that's cool. I think that gives people a really good idea of like whether they should be working on strength endurance, how they should do it, how they would structure it, and then what kind of the step-by-step process would be to that. What would like the final testing phase of a strength endurance? Okay, this is two questions. Same thing though. First one, what would a test be for a strength endurance in isolation of a snatch? What would that be for you for an elite level male?
I think by the way the flow of CrossFit seems to be going right now would be some sort of ladder. I would
Yeah,
just utilize like what they're doing at semis. I think
yeah, that's a good one.
that's a format that I would utilize, and then I'd utilize another format of something that would look like, toes a bar with an ascending snatch ladder, or another kind of pull action to see how they do with that with pull and shoulder fatigue, because we've seen that before too, and that smashes people too. So I'll use two different formats to get a feel for it.
That was going to be my second question was what would it be in a mixed fatigue setting? So you
Yeah,
answered that one. I'm going to have Nick Bader do Isabel at 225 as a test in about 3 months from now.
I
So
can't
I'll
wait to see that.
report back with that time very soon.
I can't wait to see that. So, guys, this was a great question. If you guys have questions like this, feel free to shoot them in to us. Tommy and I will answer them as we continually try to bring you guys more information. We hope you guys enjoyed the show, and give us a like, give us a share, follow, all that cool stuff on these YouTube talks.